In this video, we're going to have a look at Azure Service Level Agreements, actions that can impact them, and the service lifecycle in Azure. Hello, and in this video, we're going to have a look at Azure Service Level Agreements, or SLA. So a Service Level Agreement describes Microsoft's commitment to you for uptime and connectivity. So you can see in this website, you can get a list of all of the services and click on one and say, what is your connectivity? Alternatively, if you go further down, you can have a summary of the SLAs for all Azure services. So what is a service level agreement? So commitment for uptime. So they're saying, okay, you are entrusting us to provide you with a service. We will provide you that service and we will guarantee that it will be up for a minimum of X%. So what is that percent? So let's take an example. Let's take an example of an SLA that has a 90% availability. So you can see here we have 99.9, but let's go down a level, 99% availability. So there are 365 days in the year. So when is it not available? It's not going to be available for 1% of the time maximum. So we multiply that by 0.01. So that means that a 99% availability means that your service over an entire year might not be available for 3.65 days. And that's a lot. So you won't find too many things that are only 99% available. Now 99% is, well, it's got two nines, 99%, and so that's what it's called, two nines. 99.9% or three nines, well, now we're talking about only to be unavailable for 0.1% of the time, 0.1%. So that's a tenth of the time, so we need to divide this by a tenth. So it will be not available for 0.365 days. So if I multiply that by 24, that is 8.76 hours of downtime for 99.9%. And that's called three nines. 99.95% or 3.5 nines, well, that reduces the downtime by half. So that's about 4 hours. 4 nines or 99.99%, well, we're reducing the amount of downtime from 0.05% to 0.01. So that's a fifth of the downtime. So we're now talking less than an hour. So we're talking about 52 minutes. And then 99.999% or 5 nines, well, that's a tenth of the downtime. So we're talking about 5 minutes. Why can't you get 100% availability? Well, you don't get 100% availability for your on-prem. Suppose you are doing an upgrade and you get an email saying, our services will be unavailable from 6 p.m. on Friday to 2 p.m. on Sunday. All of that time, it is unavailable. It's the same with Azure. They have to keep updating the systems. They cannot guarantee 100% availability all the time. Now, what happens if this SLA is not met? Well, you can claim for it. First of all, if you do want some credit, you do have to claim for it. It's not automatic. If you got a successful claim, then you will get a credit, typically 10 to 25% for the entire month that the SLA was not met. Not everything has SLAs, especially free products. You're paying nothing for them, so why should there be credit if they are not available? So an Azure Service Level Agreement, that is Microsoft's commitment to you as to what their uptime guarantees and if they don't achieve that, their credit policies are. Now let's have a look at some actions that you can do that will impact Microsoft's SLA. And we're going to take the virtual machine that we've been using so far, because this actually has quite an interesting SLA. If you have a single virtual machine using standard HDD, these are the old hard disk drives. So you can imagine a mechanical hard drive, something out of the 1990s or 2000s. So if you've got one of those, then we will guarantee you a virtual machine connectivity of at least 95%. Now, 95%, 365 days in the year, it could be down 5% of the time, so it could be down 18 days. So that's rubbish. So let's try and improve this SLA. So if you change it from standard HDD to the solid state drives, then we have decreased the amount of time you'll be out by 9/10. Instead of it being out potentially for 5% of the time, it's now 0.5% of the time. So now we're talking 1.8 days. Now, if you upgrade your disks to premium SSD or ultra disks, then again, your downtime will decrease by 4/5. It will go down to a single fifth. So 99.9% or 3 nines, that's 8.8 hours. So notice we started off for the entire year at 18 days, and now we're at less than half a day. Now, if you go into availability sets, so this is more than one virtual machine in the same data center but on different pieces of hardware, then we'll take it up to 3.5 nines. So now we're talking 4 hours offline. And if you're doing availability zones, so that is the same region but different data centers miles away from each other, then we'll go to 4 nines. So we're talking less than an hour offline. So we've gone from 18 days to less than an hour per year. So that's some of the actions that can impact an SLA. What else could impact one? Well, suppose you have got 2 services that rely on each other. So we've got one virtual machine which has a 99% chance of being up, and it relies on something like networking or a storage maybe, which also has a 99% chance of being up. Or maybe it's a database, 99% chance, with storage 99% chance. So what does that make it? Well, there's a 1% chance that the first one's going to be down, and a 1% chance that the second one is going to be down. So it's roughly a 2% chance that it's going to be down. So your SLA is roughly 98%. If you want to do it more exactly, then there's a 99% chance of uptime on the first one and a 99% chance of uptime on the second one. So it's 98.01%. But you won't need to have that such a level of detail that's necessary for this exam. Similarly, what if you added machines that could be used either or? Well, we've seen an example here. If you've got 2 or more instances deployed among availability zones, then that increases your chance of uptime. So we've gone from 18 days to less than an hour. So if you've got 2 separate services which are dependent on each other, then your SLA goes down. If you've got 2 separate instances or services, that is an either or, so I'll go to the first one, and if the first one's down, I'll go to the second, then your SLA goes up. So one is dependent on the other, and the other one is redundant. It's an extra way of communicating. We've also seen that different disk type can change your SLA. We saw in the previous video that free products generally don't have an SLA. We've seen that availability zones could increase your SLA and also availability. And if I look at storage, we'll be looking at storage accounts later on. And we go from locally redundant storage, so that's just copying in the same data center, maybe even on the same set of hardware, up to read access geo-redundant storage. So in other words, it's copied into a second region. Then that again increases your SLA. It increases the amount that your services are going to be available, having it in a second region, or maybe just in a separate availability zone, but not in the case of storage accounts. It actually has to be in a separate region as well. So actions that can impact an SLA. Having more than one service, do the services rely on each other? Is it the combined, or is it either or? Can you have different types of disks? What about redundancy? What about availability zones? And if you want an SLA, then it needs to be a paid-for product. It also needs to be a generally available product, and we'll have a look at that in the next video. Every year, new Azure services come onto the market, but they have to go through a development cycle. And this website allows you to see what the cycle is currently for a lot of services. So it starts off in development. For example, you can see here Microsoft to establish its first data center region in Sweden. So it's got ones in Norway, it's now going to Sweden. That is in development. In other words, it's not open to the public. Afterwards, we then have preview. So if I scroll down, we can see Azure boards in preview. Now, there are two types of preview phases. There could be a private preview or a public preview. A private preview is open to select customers only, and it's for their feedback. A public preview is open to anybody with an Azure account, and it's for your feedback. So it's not a guarantee that this will continue to the next level, which is general availability. It is there for feedback. It will probably not have a service level agreement because we don't necessarily have all of the things working in a preview thing. Similarly, it probably won't be covered by customer support. So what should you use preview products for? Well, I would use them just to experiment, to test. Certainly don't use it for mission critical applications. It is probably going to be cheaper than general availability services. It may even be free. However, there are some really big caveats. Previews are provided as is with all faults as available, excluded from service level agreements and limited warranties, may not be covered by customer support, may be subject to reduced or different security compliance or privacy commitments. So basically, beware. Do not use previews to process personal data or other data that is subject to heightened legal or regulatory requirements. And we may change or discontinue previews at any time without notice, and it doesn't go into the next stage. It need not go into general availability. General availability, that's the standard phase for most mature services. It probably comes with a SLA as long as you're paying for it, and customer support should be available, but you'll probably now have to pay whatever the going rate is for the service. Now, services come and go, and when they go, this could be called retiring or deprecation. You'll see that Microsoft will provide 12 months notification before retiring a guest operating system and before retiring an SDK. That's a software development kit. All other Azure services, instead of 12 months, you'll be given a minimum of 30 days notification. So the service life cycle in Azure starts off in development, goes to preview, which might be private, which might be public, which might be both, one after the other, then goes into general availability, and after a while it may be retired or deprecated. Coming up, we'll have a quick quiz to see how much you can remember from this video. However, before that, if you want to learn more about Microsoft Azure, please go to our website, idodata.com, and go to Azure and AZ900 Azure Fundamentals, where you can learn about cloud concepts, core Azure services, core solutions and migration on Azure, management and security features, identity and governance features, and more. If you're more interested in data on Microsoft Azure, then please have a look at our DP900 course. So let's get into those questions. First of all, Microsoft has started to create a service. It is now in its development phase. Which of these is not a typical next stage in the service lifecycle of this service? Is it private preview, public preview, or general availability? The correct answer is general availability. That is not a typical next step. You will either have a private preview or a public preview first. Next, what is the minimum SLA for service in the public preview phase? Is it 3 nines, 99.9%? Is it 2 nines, 99%? Or is there generally not an SLA? The answer is, for the public preview phase, there is generally not a service level agreement. Next question. What happens if Microsoft doesn't meet its SLA and you make a successful claim? Do you get a year's free service? Do you get just an apology? Do you get $1,000? Or typically do you get 10 to 25% credit? You will typically get 10 to 25% credit. And the final question for this video. Which of these will not typically affect an SLA of a virtual machine? Is it changing the type of disk from HDD to SSD, for example? Is it adding availability zones? Or is it changing region? Well, the correct answer is changing region. Both of the others can indeed improve or decrease the service level agreement. Well, I hope you enjoyed this quiz and this video. If you did, then please give it a like, and why not subscribe and click that bell? That way you'll be notified of any new videos. If you want more, there's a playlist on the end screen where you can see more about Azure services. I'm Philip Burton of idodata.com. Thanks for watching and keep learning.